Hello and welcome to Hoda's Career Info. I am your host, Hoda, and this is the channel for everyone seeking career knowledge. My guest today, Devon Turcotte, shares my passion to support young adults to success. Devon is the owner of Careerified, a company she started with the purpose of changing the career conversation. Devon absolutely enjoys helping youth find what she describes as career clarity. If you are struggling with what to do after high school, or you're not sure about what you want to be when you grow up, Devon can help you figure out those next steps in your career and education journey. Welcome, Devon, and thank you so much for joining me. I'm very happy that you have agreed to come and see me and talk to me because you and I share a passion of supporting young adults to career success. And as an advocate of what I like to think of as career literacy for youth, can you share your definition of career literacy and its value for your young clients?
Yes, absolutely. I love the term career literacy. I had never heard it before you said it to me, and I was like, it's so perfect. To me, career literacy is really about understanding that careers can unfold in sort of weird and wonderful ways. There are often more than one way to get where you want to go. It might be because a different path than you think is the set path gets you to that career you've always wanted, or it might be that careers you hadn't previously considered fit you in a way that you didn't expect. So that to me is really what it's about. And I find it's especially valuable for youth to take on this kind of mindset early because it sets a foundation for them. They learn to expect lifelong career development. They learn to expect that trial and error might be just a little bit part of it. And from what I've seen, that is a much better replacement than, follow step 1, step 2, step 3, and land in your perfect career by age 25, which I think is the mindset that a lot of youth take on early on.
Well, I love that you do what you do. And I have to ask you, as a career professional, most of us come from different backgrounds, and that's probably why we decide to come and support others. Can you describe the path that led you to create your company, Careerified?
Oh my gosh, it's quite a path. So I actually started my career in environmental consulting, which is not the answer people usually expect. I did my undergrad in geography, really loved my program. And by the time I got to my final year, I thought environmental field is where I'd like to go. I had absolutely zero industry experience, absolutely zero hard skills. So I actually did a graduate certificate program at one of the colleges here in Ontario that it was in environmental management and assessment. And the whole thing was around teaching you hard skills for the industry. So I was hired from that program into a small firm in my hometown of Sarnia, Ontario. And we specialized in air and noise regulations for industrial facilities, which probably means nothing to most people listening to this. The organization was actually awesome. They were a great place to get a first grown-up job. It was a small business. People were really invested in the organization and about people development. And it was a great place to cut my teeth, I guess, as a young worker, but I hated the work. So after, gosh, it wasn't even 2 years, I went back to school. I did another graduate certificate program in communications. And my intention at that time was to get more into, maybe working for an environmental nonprofit in community outreach or working in some sort of education capacity in the environmental world. And I ended up in a nonprofit, but it was completely unrelated. So I got a job with Skills Ontario, which promotes careers in the trades and technologies to students. And I spent the next several years conducting, oh my gosh, thousands of presentations in schools, talking to students from grade 7 to 12 about what is a trade, what is an apprenticeship, what kinds of things can you do in high school to help you figure out what careers might suit you. And that was really my introduction to the world of career development and career education. And from there, I moved into the community college system and worked in recruitment and admissions for a while, and then in the campus career center. And Now, of course, as you mentioned, I'm in my own business called Careerified. So it was a weird route to get here, but I really enjoy this field, and I think there's a lot of really great value to be had for people who really need that career guidance.
Well, thank you for elaborating on that. And yes, it is an interesting background. I think I told you this before, but I really love the name of your company, Careerified. And when I first saw it, somehow I just kept couldn't take the idea of glorified out of my mind. And I have to ask you, with your passion, your values, and the work you do, you are truly changing and glorifying the importance of career conversations, particularly among young adults. Can you please elaborate on this?
Like how I came up with the name, you mean?
Yes, yes.
What it's all
I
about? Yeah.
probably lost you that. Yeah, because
Yeah, we have.
like, how do you connect it to the work you do, right? Yeah.
It's really funny, and I think we talked about this at one point. I've actually done, I don't know what you call them, some kind of assessments on this point around like creativity, and the weakest aspect of creativity for me is ideation. So doing something like naming a business is like so far out of my wheelhouse. It's unbelievable. But the word careerified just popped into my head one day. I don't even know where it came from, but I started Googling like mad to make sure nobody else had it. So I wasn't just copying someone. And to me, it's really about a mindset shift. It's not just going to somebody to get career coaching support, to get, advice, to help with a transition from one job to another. It's about developing this mindset of, I'm going to become careerified, stepping into a career positive mindset, stepping into a space where you are taking action in your career and being intentional about your career and exercising control over your choices. I think that actually you would probably define it as career literacy. So to me, that's really what it's about.
Well, I love it, and I love the idea behind it. And in your, I'm just going to stick to what I saw in your website, and because it is loaded with so many things that I agree with, but also you're not afraid to bring it to the forefront. And I'll go to first to your YouTube intro, where you talked about the relation of educational and career choice to self-esteem. A very important topic. I think that many parents are not aware that this is important. Not like talking to a career coach or is so important for your child's self-esteem. That's how I see it. So do you mind elaborating on how the two, educational and career choices, are connected to self-esteem?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, for many years, I was in schools with kids grade 7 to grade 12. That was, and working with thousands and thousands of them over the years and fielding a lot of similar questions. And, it made me realize we start our kids on this idea quite early that all they need to do is just pick a thing they want to do and then follow this prescribed set of steps to get to the thing. And then there are all these societal pressures that come in, right? You have to graduate at the same time as all of your classmates. You should probably be following the same post-secondary path as all of your classmates. If you don't, you'll get left behind. This is the kind of language we hear over and over and over. So then what would happen, and especially once I moved into the post-secondary world, is for whatever reason that choice didn't work out. And it might be that, they started into the program and they weren't enjoying it as much as they expected to. They may have gotten close to graduation and said, I have no idea what I'm going to do with this in the real world. But the thought process always goes back to feeling blindsided, feeling a little bit like, what did I do wrong? Everybody else has it figured out. How come I don't have it figured out? Where did I miss the boat? That sort of the thought process. And not once do they ever question the idea that perhaps it was all those underlying assumptions of you have to graduate on a certain schedule, you have to follow a certain path. Maybe that's the stuff that was wrong. And nobody has ever said that to them before. And so they internalize it and they take it personally. The major catalyst actually for me to go out and open my own business and start to kind of focus a bit more on this demographic was a news story that came out some years ago. And it was about 4 suicide deaths that had happened at one university in one semester. And during the news story, of course, they interviewed students and staff to get input and reflection. And one of the students said, we're expected to get 90s. We're expected to have all these part-time jobs. We're expected to do all these extracurriculars. And then they tell us, but make sure you're getting enough sleep and taking good care of yourself. And that's impossible. And I'm watching this story as a young, young, new career professional going, who is expecting this from you? Because you're right, that is impossible. And yet you somehow think that's the bare minimum in order to be hired into an entry-level job. Like there's a serious disconnect there. And so they take it on themselves and say, I obviously did this whole thing wrong, instead of going, whoa, 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 whoa. Why would you expect me to have 90s and a perfect resume and all these great accolades just for an entry-level job out of graduation? There's this massive disconnect. So the more I think we can educate our kids on making better decisions around education, around careers, what that actually looks like, the more we take away that, I think, that tendency to be blindsided if something doesn't work.
Such an important conversation. And again, I saw you talk about it in your website, and I'm very, very happy to see it out there. So really encourage everyone every parent listening to check out Devon's website, because it gets you thinking about the importance of really working on careers with your child. I'm going to stick with your website because I did find another interesting thing on it, which is the values page. We always tell our clients that, your future is determined, among other characteristics, is determined by your values. And you do have a values page, which is totally different than the about page, which we all have, including myself. And one of your values stood out. You can elaborate also on the values page and where it came from, but also I want to ask you, so it's two questions, I guess, is one of the values that stood out to me, because I recently wrote an article about it, and I think it's important that we change the conversation on it. And the way you say it is, follow your passion is a terrible career advice. So again, I love it. You are definitely changing the career conversations. So two questions then, your idea for the values page, and then follow your passion is a terrible career advice.
So the values page itself is something I saw somebody else do. And I was like, what a great idea. I love that. I mean, totally not in the career world. And I mean, you're right. We always talk about your values should drive your career choices. Well, then why aren't I walking the talk? So I decided to go ahead and do that. Anybody should do it. It's a great way to give clients, I think, a sense of what to expect when they work with you. So that was the reason for putting it in there. In terms of the idea that follow your passion is terrible career advice, I have three thoughts, because I've also written a couple of articles on this. One is, I've spent, especially in my early days with Skills Ontario, I spent a lot of time saying things like, do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. You've all heard that one. That sounds really, really great in theory, but it turns out to be very different when you're sitting in front of a 16-year-old kid who was freaking out saying, but I don't have a passion. What's wrong with me? How come all my friends have a passion and I don't have a passion? I'm doing it wrong, right? That's one of those points that comes up. So that's always a problem. The next thought that I find that I have, and it's because of what I've come up against, is you have to consider, what if what they're passionate about doesn't pay, right? I mean, when I think about myself in high school, my big passion was classical piano. It's almost impossible to make a living as a classical pianist. I mean, pandemic aside and no concerts happening and all that, it's a very difficult path to follow. And even when I look back and look at how drastically the music industry has changed since I was in high school, it's hard to know, would I have been able to build a sustainable and fulfilling career? I don't know. It's not to say I could or couldn't, but by just saying follow your passion, it closed out a whole lot of other options. And then the last one, which has been more curious to me in maybe more recent years and months, is a number of studies have come out now that indicate that getting paid to do the thing that you're passionate about is a really, really good way to kill your passion for that thing. Because suddenly it's being dictated in different directions, right? You have somebody who wants something that's sellable. That's not quite the same thing as having, creative freedom. So I think, especially when you're talking to somebody who is part of a younger demographic, saying something like follow your passion is just too simplistic to be quality career advice.
I totally agree with you. And I probably would add the point again, it could get scary because, like you said, that I don't have a passion. What is wrong with me? And
Mhm.
it could get overwhelming for a young person.
Mhm.
I do have one final question for you, Devon, and that is about the different packages that you offer. Part of the series is educating clients about this, as career professionals, what services we offer and the value in them. So, can you please perhaps talk about the different packages that you offer, but choose one, your favorite or your client's favorite, and elaborate on it and the value it offers?
Sure. The one use the most often, the one I'm approached for the most often, I call it the Education Planner Pack, and it's really great for high school students and for youth who've withdrawn from post-secondary education. And the idea is to help them, figure out what they want to be when they grow up. So we look at the career side of it. I'll use different assessment tools and that sort of thing to help them narrow down to a list of a few careers that they can explore in more detail. And then we walk through, how do you get good quality information, right? Instead of just reading a university website about take this program and you'll get into this type of career, how can you get more information about what that career actually involves? Are there things aside from a particular degree or diploma that you need? And then what programs actually suit? And how do you get good information about what to expect as a student or an alumni? And that, I can pull in a lot of my own post-secondary training with that, as well as that career side. So it's kind of a balance of the two. And then another thing I add with that is looking at sort of success in the programs that they want to pursue. So making sure that they understand where to go for support if they need it. And that's everything from, you can probably get free tutoring to, is there a specific service that will help support you if you identify as an Indigenous student or a racialized minority? Because most schools do have those types of services. So that's probably the one I use the most. What I'm finding lately is that younger workers, maybe 5 years out of post-secondary, are looking for a career shift. The phrase that comes to mind is quarter life crisis. And so that's a little bit of career exploration, but it's a lot more around the transition stuff. So like doing networking, making sure your job search documents are up to par, being prepared for your job interviews, that kind of stuff.
Well, thank you so much for elaborating on that. With the educational planner pack, do you have like a time limit, or is it the time like 4 hours? Do you buy hours, or how does it work?
I split it out. I do 5 hours one-on-one coaching. Clients have homework to do between sessions. So usually they'll take a week to 2 weeks between sessions to kind of get that done. Mostly, of course, I am working on a lot of cases with current students. So it's like they still have to do their homework, and especially at certain points of the year where you're dealing with exams and that sort of thing. Sometimes people will say, yeah, I think I'd like 2 weeks to do this, which is totally fine. But yeah, it's 5 one-on-one sessions. And then I actually create a report at the end that sort of summarizes everything and provides recommendations for next steps.
Flexibility is definitely important when working with young adults when they have other priorities, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you so much, Devon, for answering my questions. Now, was there anything else you wanted to talk about that I didn't ask you, or something to wrap up our conversation today?
I think for me, I've put the tagline on my business as change the career conversation. And I think for me, it's really about doing just that, right? Getting away from pick a thing by the time you're 18 and just follow the steps and everything works out. And, for me, it's really about being more intentional and being more realistic. And particularly for parents, I think parents are identified by Generation Z as the number one career influencer in their lives. And I usually get a few jaw drops when I say that to parents. They're like, my kids don't listen to me. They do, and maybe in different ways than you think. So I think probably one of the best things parents can do is model that behavior, but talk about their careers holistically. Talk about the ups and the downs, the sacrifices they've made, what's worked and what hasn't, as opposed to sticking to kind of this party line of, well, just pick the thing you love and then follow the steps to get there. Because the first way, the way I like, is a lot more realistic, and from what I've seen, leads to better and more comfortable outcomes for their kids.
Thank you so much, Devon, for not shying away from changing the career conversations. I'm very proud of your work, so keep it going. And thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for joining Hoda's Career Info. It was a pleasure to hear Devon Turcotte's journey and learn about her passion for her work. You can connect with Devon on her company's website, Careerified.ca, but you can also find her on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. I am your host, Hoda, and until next time, keep moving forward.